Thank you very much for the extremely interesting presentation, Heta. It was so many thoughts. I have so many thoughts, and definitely this follow-up is needed. And I'm thinking, how can we do it that when these guides, for instance, what our product end products are from this project, that how can we measure the impact of them? How can we collect data? So many thoughts, but I would like to give the floor to others as well. So please raise your hand and comments, questions to Heta. Timo.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with, I would say 98% of the presentation. On the other hand, I think it's important to understand how most researchers work. And it's really hard, as you say, to get an evaluation of the return on investment on a good employer's guide or a higher education guide, or because at one point or most points, the funding stops when it was there in the beginning. So a lot of research is done quite pro bono. Most researchers, especially in an entry-level researchers, are not really paid for their work. So a lot of them are really enthusiastic, and I totally agree to get people on board that are from the community. But for some people, it starts with an interest in some kind of idea, and they go out there, and it's hard to put the return on investment evaluation on that kind of research. It's different when you have a lot of funding, long-term contracts. So the most people I work with, even myself, my current contract ends in 23, and I'm 42 years old, and I haven't had a long-term contract in my life. So most of the times it's kind of a couple of benchmarks we have to hit to get another contract. And I think it's good to have an open call to include members of the community in research, and especially make it available. But even to make it available, you need funding again as well. So the typical price for an open access publication is somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 euros, which has to come from somewhere. And if you don't have the support I was lucky enough to have an early career support who told me, Timo, everything you do with the autism and employment topic, you can publish open access. But that is not a support everyone has. So I think it's good to call for these things, but it won't be manageable for everyone.
Yes, we have a lot of experience. We have observed these things for basically a couple of decades in many countries. So we're very, very aware of what the general terms for research funding are and what the effects of that are. It is basically distorting the way that research is done. And in the current situation, all I can see that researchers can do is think about that when they are designing that next bit of research, thinking of how to connect to organizations and bodies that can do that long-term work instead of just thinking of doing their own thing short-term. Because frankly, many of us are rather frustrated in seeing short-term projects come and go. And usually I've tested this when I've been a speaker at various events. I ask, how many of you guys remember such and such a project that happened 3 years ago or 5 years ago? And usually they've vanished without a trace. Absolutely no one knows. Absolutely no one is building their own work on top of that old work. And for us, of course, it means these projects visit our lives briefly and vanish. And whether the model is good or bad, it disappears. So that's one reason also why we, the Autistic People's Organization, should be talking to funding bodies and trying to rectify some of these things.
Thank you. Any other comments, thoughts? We still have about 1 minute. Mark, please.
I mean, I can only speak from my experience here in the UK, and I think the goals and the strategy is somewhat aligned, because there's been a major shift in the last few years in the UK about impact and looking at what is the impact of the research. So it's not just a matter of doing research for research's sake, and then when the funding is gone, you move on to the next project because it sustains people in their jobs. Having impact and being able to fully maintain and exploit, or whatever you want to call it, the outputs of a project is rewarded by the system that's in place here. There are many other factors as well which reward people generally based on the profile that they already have. So it's not an equal system where everyone gets the same opportunities. But I do think that it is shifting, and people's mindset is shifting as well. So like Timo said, I agree with, I don't know about 98% or 99% or whatever, but I'm in full agreement. And I do think it's good to have these these ideas and these motives in mind when putting a new funding application together, and looking for partners and thinking about how a project can be sustained after the funding runs out, so that the benefit is shared and is maximized for everyone. So yeah, I think it was a really good and a bit of a, you have the last slot, and it was actually a bit of a wake up slot. We talked a lot about the actual nature of the project's aims today, but this is a more philosophical question behind it. Why do we do these things, and how should we do them, and do we do them in the right way? And so I'm very grateful for that. And it's certainly, for me, this comes to an end. I'm involved in another project, but then I have to think about what's next for me, and where does the research take me. So thank you very much for raising this.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Mm-hmm.
And is sort of a final comment here. Overall, the organizations that I deal with, they are absolutely delighted that this kind of work happens. I will be telling them about the image results, and they will be read with interest.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, thank you. I hope they will
be engaged with this particular topic. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, over to you. Well, Mark I think he's setting up the slide. I still want to say, did I miss any comments here? There's been good discussion happening in the chats. And
there was a question about measuring autistic quality of life. And I think that the existing quality of life tools do require some adjustment when we're using them with autistic adults, but they are useful all the same. So worth a try if you need something to do that with, because I think it's crucial. Not every kind of employment improves quality of life, as we all know. We've all had those jobs. And it's important that we look at more than just productivity at work or the fact that someone is in work. It needs to be making a difference for the person too.
Yeah, and I think I wrote earlier today, I think it was right in the beginning, about the productivity and performing and all these words, and I think it's a common issue what is required these days, and I don't necessarily like it with this being productive and how do you perform and all that. Well, that's another topic and discussion. Over to you, Mark.
Well, I remember, just to say something about this, I remember when we had our second project meeting, when we were still allowed to meet in person, and we went to Helsinki, and Heta came to that, and that's what Heta talked about productivity, and how there are other factors that are equally, if not more important, to look into, and it's not just about productivity. And in fact, if you focus on some of the other things, the productivity may rise. So it's not just about grafting and putting as many hours in as possible. So yeah, the topics are, these are recurring topics, and we have tried to address them in the toolkit for students.